Well, good afternoon out there in SADS Facebook Live land, or good evening or good morning, I guess, wherever you are across the globe. This is the 30th SADS Facebook Live program. I can't believe we've been together this long since we did the first one on March 27. I'm back with you. I'm Mike Ackerman, genetic cardiologist at Mayo Clinic, and I've had the privilege of serving as the president of the Sudden Arrhythmia Death Syndrome Foundation, the SADS Foundation, for about 14 years now. And so on behalf of Alice Laura, who is the CEO of the SADS Foundation, thanks for choosing to spend your Friday afternoon, evening, or morning with us, or whenever you'll look at this program. We've had over 100,000 views to date. And this program is going to be, just like the other 29, a really good one. You'll want to look at it because I'm joined today by 3 fellow board members of the SADS Foundation. Some have been with me almost since the beginning of my time with it in 2014. Mr. Anthony Locator on my right there. Thanks, Anthony. And Mr. Scott Dailyard up there in the corner. Both of them joined the board 13 years ago. And then Mr. Phil Howard, our newbie, our new guy. So Phil and Scott and Anthony, thanks a lot for joining us and giving a chance for SADS Facebook Live people to get to know who's behind the scenes on the board, helping to try to guide the mission and vision of the SADS Foundation. We'll get together and start talking in a bit, but as everybody knows out there, I tend to give you an update where we are. Don't know that we're flattening the curve that well yet. If 40,000 cases every day is flat, doesn't sound too flat to me. So remember, everybody, keep doing. Anti-maskers go away. Put them on. Just put them on. They work. And as you heard the CDC director say, they may work even better than the vaccine is going to whenever that comes out. So do the things that work, everybody. Over 30 million cases worldwide. It's not going to take long that we're going to reach 1 million deaths worldwide from this virus. We're at 6.7 million in the United States. So about 2% of United States citizens have the virus or had the virus. And we're approaching 200,000 deaths in the United States. Thankfully, the death rate continues to fall as we get better and better at treating this condition. Overall, the death rate, say, for example, at Mayo Clinic is just over 1% in Olmsted County. So overall, we know how to do this virus and treat this virus and treat it well. So if you're having anxiety about awful from the virus, you don't need that anxiety. And as one of our regulars on SADS Facebook Live, she loved the expression refuse to fear, which I launched several months ago. And so refuse to fear. Be knowledgeable, be careful. Let's stay corona free for as long as we can. I and my family, we're doing all we can to stay corona free for as long as possible. And so that's the corona update. But now I'm turning it to Phil. So we have 3 of our board members. Now be assured out there that not our entire board is composed of a Y chromosome. So don't get worried out there. We are very chromosomally balanced. We have plenty of 2Xers on the board. Over half are women on the board. Not all of us are physicians on the board. In fact, most of us are not. And so I'm joined by 3 gentlemen, none of whom are physicians or scientists, all who are very special to the SADS Foundation, very special to me. And I thank you guys for taking the time to share with people who you are and why you have committed some of your time and treasure to being a part of leading this organization. So Phil, tell us a little bit about who you are and your journey in life thus far and how you got connected to the SADS Foundation.
Yeah, pleasure, Dr. Ackerman, and thank you. And for everybody who's tuning in, really a pleasure to spend some time, talking about my experience and why I got involved with SADS and why it's passionate to me. I'm I'm an accountant by trade, not a physician. Actually, I'm a partner with an accounting firm. Kind of fortuitously, my clients are all in the life sciences industry. And I have two children, a 9-year-old little boy, he'll be 10 here next, excuse me, he'll be 9, he's 8, he's gonna be 9 here. And then my daughter, Pierce, she just turned 6. And 3 years ago on Father's Day, she got out of her crib and became unresponsive. And my wife and I, we don't know why it happened. And we ended up performing CPR. I still remember it took 5 minutes and 39 seconds for the paramedics to get there. Long story short, spent a lot of time at Stanford in the ICU. Weren't sure if my daughter was going to survive. She did end up having an ICD implanted and somewhat of an undiagnosed SADS condition. And I got to tell you, it was one of the darkest times of my life going through that. And through that experience, and when I was sitting in a situation, my wife not knowing anything about the condition, the disease, what was going to happen, I was put in touch with some great people from the SADS Foundation, and it was when you're sitting in a situation like that is total life changing and I'll say extremely humbling. The SADS Foundation and the folks just totally were great help to me. So I made a little promise to my maker that I would give back as much as I could, for the benefit that I received. And in my skill set, I'm an accountant. A lot of people don't like accounting. I love it, but there's a value that I can help provide. So I reached out to the team and said, look, whatever I can do to help and use my skill set, not as a physician, but in my finance knowledge to help the SADS Foundation. And so that's how I got involved. So the great story is my daughter is doing terrific. She's hasn't had another episode yet, and she's just a bouncy, I'll call her a fierce little girl who's she's doing kindergarten behind me in another room right now, sheltering in place, but she's doing great. So Dr. Ackerman, that's kind of my story and how I got involved with SADS, but it was just a great benefit and resource in having, being able to connect immediately with somebody that was able even to connect me with another patient family and, talk about their experience, just because when you're in that situation, and I'm sure a lot of people listening have been through that, or maybe, going through it right now, having a group like SADS there is just, was invaluable. So that's a little bit about me.
Phil, thanks a lot. And you have been incredibly value added to our organization. Those out there, Phil and several other members, Scott and Anthony, have been really important in the fiscal stewardship of our organization as a nonprofit advocacy organization, making wise decisions with our resources, trying to maximize what we can do and keep us laser focused on our mission with what resources we've been given and that we receive from people like you out there who choose to donate. And so don't forget that you can get to the SADS Foundation, www.sads.org, or if you prefer, which some of us do, stopsads.org. There's a little button in the top right corner called Donate, and you can donate online, and it's really easy to partner with us in that way. I'm going to go from top left to diagonal, so Hollywood Squares, and down to Mr. Anthony Locator. And I met him 13 years ago. I can still remember a very special time with Anthony, his wife, and his children in Washington State. But Anthony, tell us a little bit about how you came to discover SADS back in the early 2000s with your children.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you, Dr. Ackerman. My pleasure. So my 23-year-old daughter, Annie, had arrested in a swimming pool in 2006. And she was resuscitated by the lifeguard at the time. It was at a YMCA swimming pool. We had been alerted a few months earlier that her heart had a little bit of an elongated QT interval. And at that time, some knowledge was coming out, and we were lucky enough to find our way to the SADS Foundation website and get a wealth of information, and even speak with Alice, still the CEO. She was the CEO then. And then we did attend that first, or at least our first international conference out at Mount Rainier, where we met Dr. Ackerman and Dr. Etheridge and some others who were physicians. And so we were immediately inundated with a wealth of information and answers to just the myriad of questions that you get. And so in our case, our daughter Annie has long QT syndrome 1. She was in our family patient 0. So then with her, we were, which was, I think, Dr. Ackerman, you can keep me honest, genetic testing was relatively new in 07. And we were lucky enough then to get her genetically tested, which she was positive for LQ1, and then use that test to test the rest of the family. And as it would go, then we learned then my wife, Kathy, was also positive. Her 2 sisters, one of her sister's children. And so through that experience of connecting with SADS and getting this information and getting access to folks like Dr. Ackerman and the genetic testing, we were able to really secure the safety and knowledge of this condition within our family. And obviously it was a blessing at that time, as difficult of a period as it was. And today Annie is thriving, as are my sister-in-laws, my wife, and my niece, who all are positive for LQ1. And like our accountant friend, I have a unique skill set related to analytics and financial acumen and business development. My career is a chief revenue officer in the financial technology space. And so I was asked to join the board by Alice and absolutely jumped at the chance to help out where I can. So between Phil and I, we like to think we keep the books in the right direction and try to keep the money flowing so that Dr. Ackerman and Alice can continue to get the word out and spread all of the knowledge and information. And for me, I will add, the continuation of the annual international conferences have been so helpful. I go to them religiously yearly. This year's, of course, will be more virtual. But the wealth of information that you gain at these conferences, I can't stress enough. The ability for all of us to meet people in our similar situations is just paramount, and something that I would encourage everyone to do if they are thinking about it. It'll pay spades in your investment to go for sure. So with that, I'll pause there. That's our story, and very happy to be part of the board. So thank you.
Thanks, Anthony. And I just cannot believe that Annie is 23. Did you say?
23.
Oh my goodness. And as some of you, we are kind of growing up together. I see Lene has joined us, and hi, Lene. And I've watched her daughter grow up, and I learned earlier today that sweet Ellie just turned 16 and got her driver's license. So Ellie, happy birthday out there. And Dana from Ireland, and Carrie from Virginia, and Mary from Arkansas, and Melanie. So thanks for joining. We know that there's typically about 50 to 100 who come live, and then afterwards in the archives, which you all can get and send to your friends and family members. Every one of the 30 episodes are archived either at the SADS Foundation website or at the SADS YouTube channel, and you can advance those and forward those. Some of them you forwarded to many of your friends, whether or not they have a SADS condition, like the one we did on July 24 with Dr. Stacy Rizza here from Mayo Clinic, one of our infectious disease leaders for the COVID-19 task force for all of Mayo Clinic. And we know that has been one of the hottest or most viewed of our programs to date, because the information has been so important. And it hasn't changed. Almost everything she said 2 months ago turns out to be exactly still true. That's kind of newsworthy and very helpful information. And so check out the archives of all of them. Last but not least, Scott's all three of these gentlemen are vital to our organization, and they guide us, and their wisdom is really helpful. And so we have accountant top left, we have finance guru, Anthony, bottom right for me, and top right is one of our lawyers, or the lawyer on the board of the SADS Foundation, Scott Dailyard. So Scott, tell the audience, I know this brings back memories, and of course, as we know, a lot of our SADS families, the story starts in tragedy, and we've heard success from Phil and Anthony. Unfortunately, yours wasn't. But tell
Sure.
our SADS Facebook Live how SADS unfortunately became important to your life.
Right, right. And it's been very important in my life and the life of my family. But it did start with a sad story. My wife, Cynthia Daylard, was 38 years old and the mother of two very young daughters at the time. They were 6, Miranda and Julia, barely 3, when Cynthia collapsed at work. And in sort of an emotional moment during a meeting, lost consciousness, was rushed to the ER at George Washington Hospital in DC. She was never fully resuscitated, although they did restore, her heartbeat. But she was later diagnosed post-mortem with long QT type 1. And after her death, we sought genetic testing, had both of her daughters tested, my daughters tested. Miranda was also positive for the gene marker for long QT type 1. My daughter Julia was not. And, so we've moved forward with beta blocker therapy for Miranda. She's responded beautifully. She's been asymptomatic her whole life and has had really no issues as a result of her illness. But, at the time, this was a huge shock. Their mother had not been symptomatic, had no history of sort of SADS symptoms, which, we can review, until the moment of her death, really. And so long QT was a brave new world for all of us. I remember, one of the earliest calls that I took after this incident unfolded was actually from Dr. Michael Vincent, the late and great Michael Vincent, who was the founder of the organization. And we were introduced by a common friend and a man named Ralph Hardy, who was then a partner at my law firm. And Ralph Hardy had also served on the SADS board at one time and was a patient of Dr. Vincent's, and of course heard the story of my family. But I had no idea that here was this man that I'd been working fairly closely with for years, had this association with the organization, this tiny but important organization. And I remember it was Dr. Vincent was really the first person that explained to me the mechanism of the disease and helped put me in contact with Alice and others at the organization, who really sort of put us on our road to being able to manage this thing, to understand it and manage it and deal with it effectively. I was later asked to join the board, I think succeeding Ralph in that position. And it's been a wonderful association, very meaningful association for me, to have some role in helping to raise awareness of these conditions and connect families to treatment resources and knowledge resources that they need. It's also was very useful for my daughter at one point in her life when she was feeling somewhat, isolated. I mean, she had no peers that were going through a similar phenomenon, and to connect with other kids with SADS conditions at one of the international conferences I remember in Salt Lake several years ago. It was a great experience for her, and certainly one that I hope that other families would seek out. As Michael mentioned, I am a lawyer. I'm a partner in now a global law firm of about 1,000 lawyers. And it's really been a privilege to work with the folks on this board and in this organization. That the board is entirely a volunteer board. everybody is here because this is a passion project. And, I see firsthand, how the dollars that are donated to this organization are spent and how efficient, the organization is. This is a small organization that punches way above its weight, and is really doing good for, the community that we serve. And it's one that, I've always felt very comfortable asking, friends and family members to support, because really the money goes to a very good cause, and it goes a long way.
Thanks, Scott. I'm curious to what you guys think. I was thinking back, to when Anthony, you and Scott joined us in 2007. And at that time, we were really a bare bone budget entity. I think our operating budget was probably $180,000 US a year or less. And now when Phil joined a couple years ago, we sort of reached to this about 600,000 a year territory. And I'm curious what you have seen from your vantage point, Scott and Anthony, is what have we done better in these 13 years that we were able to scale up to? And you said, and even back then, I think we punched way above our weight. And like you just said, now I think we're still punching way above. But we must be doing some things way better than we did back in 2013. And anything jump out, Anthony, as what you've seen SADS mature into, that we have such a larger footprint than we did when you guys joined?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll go first here, Scott. Being very analytical, I could say with overconfidence that the amount of medical professionals and ambulatory professionals and nurses and doctors that I come across and friends of mine come across in their everyday walk of life today are more aware of our diseases and conditions in the SADS Foundation. They've heard of long QT1 and 2. And 13, 14 years ago when my journey started, outside of you and a few others, that certainly was not the case, right? So, I'm big on results speak for themselves. And so what I think we've done a great job as an organization on is, and certainly with your leadership, Dr. Ackerman, is doing the international conferences and using technology like Facebook Live as a recent example of how to get the word out and just get our story and our mission and our message out and our education out. And it has really been just wonderful to see the growth due to that over the years. And so to me, the results are starting to speak for themselves with how many folks are aware of our conditions. And I think we're using technology, and certainly on the heels of yours and Alice's and others' hard work in the medical community at the PACES conferences and the HIMSS conferences and the heart rhythms, and being associated with all of the cardiology conferences is really, really spread the word tremendously in the last decade.
Great.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I would just echo Anthony's observations. I mean, the organization is using technology in ways that were really unheard of when I joined, whenever it was 13 years ago. And there's also been a real expansion in the family services that we offer. There was a strong mission around medical education when I joined the board, but those efforts have also expanded, dramatically. And as Anthony underscored, I think has really paid off in really meaningful awareness. These conditions are so much better understood, and really awareness saves lives in this space. Honestly, our family was kind of the perfect object lesson for that. I mean, this is a condition that if we knew my wife had and carried, she'd be with us today. I mean, there are very effective treatment options and interventions available for patients with these conditions. But if you don't know you have them, or if they're misdiagnosed, you can lead to very tragic consequences. And so, I think SADS has done a lot to further its mission in the decade plus that I've served on the board. And again, very proud of the progress that they've made.
Thanks, Scott. And I'm wondering, Phil, so Anthony and Scott have the luxury of looking back on the 13 years and saying, wow, this progress is quite exceptional and something that we're all proud of. What do you hope in 13 years, when you're reflecting back on the growth that SADS has made from now till 2030, and you're looking back on the next 10 years, that we will have done better of, more of than we're doing now as an organization?
Yeah, it's a great question. I serve a lot of companies in the life sciences space. So the companies that make therapeutics or products to treat all sorts of diseases, including, SADS type conditions. And I'm really excited about the future from a scientific standpoint and where things are going. And there's just so much cool new technology that, could dramatically, impact our patients, and those patients are family members, friends, and loved ones, right? And so I'm hoping to look back more, over my tenure with SADS of how we better, we're doing more already to kind of connect patients to treatments and therapies, in addition to, dealing with the issue, but how, what's new and more in the forefront. And part of having a network like this and an advocacy group that SADS supports is getting information out to people and understanding that there are a lot of parties involved trying to help our patients and making that connection. And thinking about clinical trials, everybody's heard a lot of on the news with COVID about what's a clinical trial, why is it important, what is it doing? And one thing I've been very passionate about is all the information for my daughter, because she did get genetically tested and we couldn't find anything today. That doesn't mean that it's not going to change, as well as our family, but the technology is moving so fast that having that information and knowing more about that and what a clinical trial is and how I can get involved is an area I think we're going to continue to shine in and getting that information out. So that's one thing I want to look back on in my tenure with the SADS Foundation and say, hey, we've really done a good job of helping that awareness and making that connection, because of these tools out there today help us reach so many more people than they did before, Facebook and our website and all those things.
Right. And I think, Scott, I was thinking of Cynthia and that story of your families is still all too tragic. And the good news, if you will, is when we find it in Miranda or we found it in Annie and we treat it, tragedy virtually never happens. Now, that wasn't the case 10 years ago, 20 years ago. We weren't as confident in our therapies, but we still need to do a better job of making the first tragedy never happen. Finding Cynthia before the Sentinel event.
Right.
And I think that's an area that we have to eventually figure out as to how do we prevent the first tragedy from happening, rather than claiming success for all of the Annies who are doing well now, and Annie's mom is doing well, and Annie's aunt is doing well. Because once we know it's there, we basically almost always do well now. And I think you see that, and you guys have been key in putting out the warning signs. So like for your wife, Scott, there was no warning sign, but for some of our families out there were warning signs that weren't recognized. There was that sudden faint that was disregarded and not acted on. And so, we've been on a warning sign campaign to try to make them, stop and say, well, wait a second, maybe there has been a warning faint that I better attend to. Anthony, I'm kind of wondering, you mentioned cascade testing and how back in 2006 or whatever it was, you found the mutation in Annie. It was LQT1. You then took that information and you said, did I give it to her? Did my wife give it to her? Where did it come from? Who else has it? That's been so powerful from genetic testing. But as you were telling that, something that came to my mind that we've never talked on this program, and it's come up in my practice, is the parent issue of when the parent discovers who was the parent, where it came from, and whether there's any parental guilt or parental stuff that has to get dealt with, thinking that I passed that on to my Annie and she almost drowned. Did you and your wife, did you guys have to navigate that, or not so much?
Yeah, no, I think you hit it on the head. My wife certainly grappled with that for sure. And then in her life, think about evolution and how far we've come. I mean, her history herself was she had fainted several times growing up. So, when you get faced with all this new information and you're like, wow, this is, all of the triggers, I had them. But then when you finally get the diagnosis, and, it certainly was upsetting for her at the time. And hopefully I'm not speaking for her wrongly, but I think we're past that phase, and, we're happy that we have this information, and we're thriving with it in our family.
Yeah, I think that unspoken guilt feeling, and we work with it with our families that we see here at Mayo Clinic. It's obviously there. Sometimes it's in the elephant in the room that nobody wants to acknowledge. But when our families can realize that, we gave a lot of good stuff to our children in that sperm for you and us on this panel, and a lot of good stuff in that egg, and came with it some of the genetic material that obviously we have no control over. And so hopefully any of our families who out there, if any of you have ever been navigating through that parental guilt that I quote, pass this on to my child, it's my fault, please don't host that any longer. It's of no value. And many families have asked, should we have children? Because I have it and now I could pass it on, or teenagers. And I just encourage you, there may or may not be reasons to have a child, but one of those reasons should never be long QT. You should absolutely create as many children as you want. When we know it's there, we absolutely know how to treat it. And so I've heard doctors tell adolescents and young adults, you have long QT, you have CPVT, you should never have a child. That is total, cruel nonsense. We know how to treat these conditions. And so Annie, when it's Annie's time and Miranda's time, they're going to create beautiful children who may or may not have long QT, 50-50 chance. But we're going to know how to deal with it if it came up heads instead of tails. Phil, I know we don't have a lot of time, but I was curious with your journey, though. Yours is a bit unique, or actually it's not unique. That is, how on earth does a 3-year-old, was it 3 when your daughter collapsed?
She was 2. She was 2.
How on earth does a 2-year-old collapse, do sudden cardiac arrest, and then sophisticated doctors run the drill and tell you, sorry, we have no answers. We don't know why. It's an unexplained sudden cardiac arrest. It's IVF, idiopathic ventricular fibrillation, for which some people change the idiopathic to the idiots don't know why.
Yeah.
How frustrating was that for you and your wife to then not have an answer and still not have the answer to the why? What was your journey like in navigating the, what do you mean you don't know why, my daughter?
It's tough. Again, she was 2. We were very lucky to catch it. And, you read a lot online about SIDS and things, and some of these sudden infant death syndrome may have been a SADS condition that wasn't diagnosed. So we were in just a very lucky position to catch it, abort it to some extent. But going through, all the experts and sitting there, and, the situation was messy, right? When it happened, the paramedics came, they did have to defibrillate her twice. They gave her the epinephrine or adrenaline shots and finally got her heart going again. But, at that point, there were some they call it artifacts. If those of you on the phone may have gone through this, when the physicians talk about artifacts, is different pieces of information that they've collected about the event to try to identify what happened. But she did go into cardiac arrest, particular defibrillation, I think is the term. And so you get into the hospital and you're sitting there and they're not sure if it was a seizure. They're not sure if it was a heart condition. She was unconscious, pretty much in a coma for a couple days, and slowly started to come out of it. You're worrying about, did she have brain damage because oxygen wasn't getting to her heart for 6 minutes? And I want to come back to one thing, and I'll tell you one thing that was very, 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 very powerful. And I'm a huge advocate of it. I think it should be a requirement to get a driver's license is CPR. If my wife and I hadn't known CPR, my daughter wouldn't be alive today. And that was, I'll tell you, we didn't do it perfectly. It didn't, but we did it, and it was kind of, it just happened. And it is a extremely simple tool, but wow, how powerful that tool is. So, but just fast forwarding, I didn't want to get my pitch in. If you don't know CPR, go online, spend a couple minutes. It's why my daughter's alive today. In addition to all the work that the doctors did, but it's frustrating.
And with what you said there, Phil, you can not only go online, but some of you remember, and the SADS, Aaron can put it out there, which episode number it was that on SADS Facebook Live, we had Richard Lanfear, a nurse down in Atlanta, teach everybody how to do the chest compressions only CPR to staying alive. And so check out that video. It'll show you, it'll take you 2 minutes to watch that, and you'll save a life and be part of the army of CPR first responders. So thanks for saying that, Phil. But back to
so we went through genetic counseling. You have the physicians are trying to do their best, of course, to identify the different factors that the qualitative and then maybe some of the quantitative information they have to come up with a diagnosis. But sometimes we don't have all the information yet, and we're going to do our best with what we have, and that's challenging. And in the treatment she's on right now, she's on a beta blocker, propranolol, and then as the standard care was treated for her, they did put an ICD in, so she did have that surgery, and that's also tough because you're kind of having to think and make this decision. We don't have a full diagnosis, but we think that this is the best thing to do to put this medical device in your child, and that's also a challenge and things we have to think about. It's an invasive surgery, and those were some very hard decisions. So it's been frustrating, but the thing to go back to what you said, Dr. Ackerman, we know how to treat it, and my wife can sleep at night, and I can sleep at night because I know she's protected through the beta blockers of the device to help address the situation. And again, I'm very optimistic about the technology and science, and it is changing every single day, and we're getting so much better at understanding these things. And my hope at some point we will pinpoint it, right, and understand what it was. And I worry for myself. I have a son too, and if there is something out there that's at risk for him, but we are just very much more aware of it. And even though we don't have there's not always a clean answer, and that's sometimes challenging. In my situation, we were just so blessed that it did turn out positively. Some people, I know it doesn't, and not knowing probably there is also very, very challenging and struggling. But I would just say the good thing is that we're getting smarter every day, and it's only going to get better longer term.
Well, your stories, Phil and Scott and Anthony, have obviously resonated so well with our Facebook Live community. I'm just glancing over on the side. And we didn't get to your questions today. We're going to save them and bring them back for when you and I out there have our question and answer session again. But there's been several great ones. Felicia would just comment, Scott, that her husband took CPR class at work a month before he saved her life with it. So that's incredible. There's others out there about an ICD that Sherry's son has. And I'll tell you, the implantable defibrillator that Scott's, that Phil's daughter has, these are life-saving pieces of technology. In fact, one of my favorite special patients, he reminds me of my own son, who we call Genzi Bear, my son. This patient, Bear, we made an aggressive decision when he was 1 year old, had not had any cardiac arrest events, to install a defibrillator. And just received a call that his ICD rescued his life from VF last Saturday as the first ICD shock. And so, as we try to weigh these diseases and what is the aggression that we need to apply in our response. Not too hot, not too cold, get it just right. More often than not, we are getting the therapies just right. And so I want to thank you three. We're at the top of the hour, not just for today, but for Anthony and Scott, 13 years of dedication to the SADS Foundation, and Phil, the last 3. And I think we're just getting started. I keep telling us at the SADS Foundation, yes, we're 30 years old, but I never want to say that the best years of the SADS Foundation are in the rearview mirror, or were in the rearview mirror. That our best days as an organization of advocacy for our families with SADS conditions, so that each and every one of you out there not only live despite your diagnosis, because I expect you to, but that you thrive and you live life large. And I know many of you out there are doing that. And I'm going to take the liberty, final thing. I normally let you on SADS Facebook Live watch my granddaughter grow up, but I'm not. I'm going to show you something else today, because Brianna is a SADS Facebook Live, maybe groupie, can we call that, Brianna? I'm not sure, but she is really, really special to me. And I just saw her and her grandmother, painted this. I think grandma must be in her 75-ish years old, but painted a picture of our dog Bella from a picture that we had posted on Happy Dog Day or something. And she saw that picture out there, and her grandmother made a portrait of our 6-year-old puppy now, Bella. So Brianna, thank you. I'll show you where it is in our home on another picture, and thank your grandmother. So for all of you who've chosen to take this time out live, or all of you who will eventually watch this episode from the SADS Foundation archives, thanks for tuning in. Stay safe out there. Stay corona-free for as long as you can. And as you do, don't fear, live large. So Anthony, Scott, Phil, have a wonderful weekend, and thanks for joining us for our 30th episode. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thanks very much.